I just can't thank you all. I mean, I just really can't thank you all for being here and for your support. It's just, it's got my heart, so thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors. And before I do, I just want to say how amazing this industry has been. For tonight's event, just this year, just for tonight's event, we've raised $2,001,600. You should all be proud of the industry that you're in and how this industry is supporting our work, which together we are just truly helping so many people. So before we begin our program to the next step, I'd just like to show one picture of each of the honorees we've had here. This event started with Tom Corcoran, and this actually picture was not taken when Tom was the honoree. It was taken just a few months ago at our walk in Dallas when, I'm sorry, where are the slides now? That picture was taken of Tom and myself and his son at our walk in Dallas. Just give me 1 second. And we practiced this for an hour with the slides, so sometimes practice doesn't work. Okay, so there's Tom and his son and myself at the walk in Dallas a few months ago. Next slide, please. This is when we used to rappel versus walks. That was our second honoree, Bob and myself and Mr. Burba. Next slide, please. This is when we were rappelling. Mark, where are you? Raise your hand. Okay. And I remember Mark twirling around the building, twirling around in circles as he was going down the building, and his son, both your sons were there laughing like crazy. Next slide, please. This is Jeff Bellotti rappelling. Actually, this was here, I think, in, no, it wasn't, obviously. This was in New Jersey, as I can tell from the pictures. There's MetLife Stadium behind him. Next slide, please. There's Chris speaking at our walk in Washington, D.C. a few months ago. And here's Mark speaking at our walk in Chicago a few months ago. So that's our honorees starting from 1st through 6th. So a hand to our honorees. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jeff Bellotti, one of our honorees. Jeff, when we started Shatterproof, was one of the first to jump in and support us. I was just telling someone a few minutes ago that when we were rappelling, I asked Jeff if he and his team at Wyndham would rappel, and I said, can you get 20 people? It's like, no way, I can get a few. And he did. He said he would come and he'd have a few people rappel down the building. The event starts at 8. At 7:30 in the morning, a yellow school bus pulls up. Jeff walks out, and 25 people follow him. He had a team of 25 people rappel down the building from Wyndham. I think it was our 3rd or 4th rappelling event ever. So Jeff's been there since the beginning. As you saw on the opening video, Wyndham's a big supporter in our walk in New York City. And I'm honored to have Jeff come up and introduce our honoree.
The huge honor on behalf of all of, Gary has an amazing team. We actually look forward to this, Gary, more than anything else, leading up to Alice getting on the phones to call you all to ask for money. So thank you. Team, the team that helps fundraise, would you please, we have so many folks on this committee that are here tonight. I mean, it is a long, long list of fundraisers. Just raise your hand. Oh, we got more than that. People are being shy. I can't tell you how important this is to so many of us. It's my honor to introduce somebody that needs no introduction. He's the man that was honored this morning for the Arnie Sorensen Award. I can't imagine Arnie is not up in heaven looking down on Mark right now, as proud as we all are for the work that Mark does and continues to do, which is why he is this year's Arnie Sorensen Award winner, recognized this morning. I'm sure your grandfather, Melky, who emigrated from what is now Turkey to Watertown, Massachusetts, where I've got a lot of Armenian friends. I grew up in Belmont, Massachusetts, and I've actually talked to the Gulasarians who actually knew your grandfather's looking down on you tonight. And Mark lost his dad when I think you were 13. And I'm sure Mark's dad is looking down on Mark today and tonight. Mark's done so much. For Mark, is all of you that know Mark know it's always about the people that he surrounds himself with. I know we have a lot of global Hyatt team members here. It's about the people he leads. It's about the culture he builds. It's about the people that are most important to him. His wife, Rachel. I remember you saying on stage a couple years ago that it was hate at first sight when you met your wife. She had gotten into Princeton. You never got over that. But somehow 35 years later, it's people like your daughter, Mara, who is your life coach, that is more important to Mark and will make him cry at the drop of a hat, as if he's ever asked to talk about Mara. It's most importantly the people that he continues to give support to. This morning we were talking about his empathy. It's about the people in Chicago, Chicagoland, the board that he just effortlessly directs and leads. It's the underserved, it's the underemployed, it's the unemployed that matter most to Mark. And Mark just didn't miss a beat when we asked him this year to be the nominee that raised $2.1 million, the most we've ever raised for what Mark knows and has been involved with all along is why we're all here tonight. It's been 13 years since Brian's passing, and 13 years ago, addiction was not looked at as it is today, thanks to all of you. 13 years ago, we did not have the legislation that we have because of all of you. And 13 years ago, we did not have the $2.1 million we have tonight because of our honoree for 2024. Let's give it up for Mark Hoplamazian.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Jeff. That's extraordinarily humbling. If I've followed anyone's footsteps in contributions to this industry or giving back to this industry, it's that guy right there. He is, apart from having led every organization in the industry, he's always at the forefront of raising money for important causes, this being prominent among his priorities. And for good reason, because the incidence of addiction is extraordinarily high. It's particularly high in our industry. And I'm not sure why the incidence rate is higher. I'm sure Gary actually has the data on why that's the case, but it is higher. So for anybody in this room, whether you have an example in your own family or not, you certainly have examples in your work family. It's guaranteed, not a question, but a certainty. And for me, first of all, getting to know Gary so well, before Shatterproof started, we were commercial partners. But then after Brian's unconscionable, unfathomable death, Gary committed himself. And, there's an old expression about the plate of ham and eggs. The chicken was involved and the pig was committed. So Gary got committed. It was all in, 100%. And the extraordinary progress, you saw some of the advocacy and testimony that he gave is just scratching the surface of the incredible impact and efficacy of Shatterproof. Legislation passed, incredible dynamism, through a commercial lens of engaging and unleashing a lot of money at the federal, state, and local levels, and private sector. Health insurers, the amount of effort that Gary's poured into making it clear that it's a win-win situation if people put money into prevention, into treatment and recovery, because it is. It's a dramatic payoff. Not to mention, even leaving apart the human aspect of it, the actual economics are just unambiguous. But for me, There are a couple of things that really drive my passion for Gary's work. The first is, at Hyatt, our purpose as a company is to care for people so they can be their best. And I talk a lot about self-care and about caring for yourself. We also recognize practice of empathy is essential to being able to care for someone. And when you practice empathy, you realize that no two people are created equally. No two people experienced the pandemic equally. No two people experience addiction the same way. So you have to actually see people and understand what environmental issues or what DNA issues happen to trigger something, and then what you can potentially do for them. So that is at the core of what I live for. Every day I wake up and I go to work, and that's what I feel like I'm doing. And Shatterproof is doing just that. It turns out that a lot of victims of addiction are unable to actually practice self-care. They are at a point in their lives where they need help. So this brings me to the second point, and I've shared this with Gary. You heard the governor of Massachusetts say, I'm not standing here as a governor or whatever, elected official, I'm standing here as a parent. Well, in my case, I'm standing here as an uncle of someone who had a very difficult time with addiction, and ended up in a situation where he ended up selling drugs in order to maintain his own addiction. And I remember when my brother, I have two brothers, but particularly close to this brother, it took him almost 2 years to tell me about it. And so the stigma associated with this disease is just shocking. So yes, we've come a long way in 13 years, but I'm telling you, this was only 5 years ago. It's still here. So I think about that. I think about the incredibly important work that Gary is doing and that the organization is doing, and very effectively. So it's a privilege for me to actually be able to have been a part of raising critical funds for Shatterproof. And it's inspirational, actually. So yes, it's a serious topic, but just think about the impact that we can all have if we actually work on this together. So Gary, thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to? I want to give you the award. Oh yeah.
I wasn't supposed to leave
Holly,
the
where's
stage,
the?
sorry.
Oh, right here. Right there we go. I'm honored to be with you. Thank you. Thank you. What I just said to Mark privately, I'd like to say to all of you is how honored I am to be with Mark, Jeff, all our honorees, and all of you here tonight. It's humbling. As was touched upon briefly, after my son died 13 years ago, it doesn't get anything worse as a parent. My son Brian. Okay, my son Brian? Okay. My son Brian doesn't get anything worse as a parent. And I really began to struggle weeks that followed with two questions. What could I have done differently as a father? I failed my son. And secondly, whatever that was, I had to accept it. And after accepting it, what could be done to spare other families of the tragedy that we had suffered? But I took what I thought would be 3 months away from my business and traveled the country, searching for answers for those two questions. I was in Washington, D.C. a lot, meeting with the federal agencies. I traveled the country, meeting with leading experts. And I learned so much in that 3 months. When I came back, I had a wall of 3-ring binders of everything I'd learned and stuck in the binders. But I took out a pad and said, what are the most important things? And I wrote down 4 things. Number 1, I wrote the word big. What I meant by that was, I had no idea the breadth of this disease. Third largest cause of death behind heart and cancer. Third, 1/4 of American families, someone in their immediate family, or more than one, has a substance use disorder, addiction. And beyond people and the human tragedy, almost $1 trillion to our economy. Hotel industry, $15 billion a year cost. That was big. Number two, I wrote the word tragic. But what I meant by that was not that my son Brian had died. What I meant when I wrote the word tragic was I learned in that 3 months that our federal government in the 2 decades before my son died had funded about $25 billion of research, researchers all across the country. And those researchers had successfully used that funding and created wonderful bodies of knowledge. Knowledge that had proven, without any doubt, through randomly controlled trials, to significantly reduce the number of our loved ones, our employees, our friends who use substances and potentially develop addiction. And a second body of knowledge that had proven, without any doubt, through randomly controlled trials, significantly improve outcomes in treatment if certain protocols were followed. Outcomes on par with someone being treated for any other chronic illness, such as heart disease or diabetes. But I wrote the word tragic because all this information was buried in medical journals and hardly any of it was being used. As a father, it destroyed me. Reading and learning about information that could have saved my son's life, maybe, and millions of others, except it was buried in medical journals. I asked myself how this could be. And I wrote number 3, no national organization. For every major disease in this country, there was one well-funded national nonprofit leading the fight to protect our families. American Heart, American Cancer, Alzheimer's Association, etc. No such organization existed for addiction. So how can that be? And I wrote number 4. It's been referenced. Stigma. You wouldn't have seen an event like this 15 years ago. I could have walked down any main street in America, any city, any town, said, I have a charity for a nonprofit for addiction. Would you donate $1? People would have looked at me like I had 6 heads. Are you kidding me? It's bad people. Just throw them in jail. Not a nonprofit. But I could see that could change. I could see that what this country needed was that type of organization for addiction. What it needed was to form that nonprofit and engage millions of Americans, hundreds and then thousands of companies, state governments, federal government, community-based organizations, volunteers, and empower and catalyze change. Change that was simply pulling the information that already existed out of the medical journals and simply block and tackle and get it implemented. Implemented with 3 criteria. Number 1, help people today. Everything we do. Number 2, in addition to helping people today, Shatterproof will never be big enough to help everybody. But if we can catalyze partnerships, bringing together state governments, health insurers, federal government, community-based organizations, people like all of you, industries, and form those partnerships, we can create the change that will not only help people today, the system will be changed. It'll help our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, future generations, forever. And the 3rd criteria, it's in our name, proof, Shatterproof. Everything based on science, not what I think, not what anybody that works for Shatterproof thinks. It's what the science shows. It's got a randomly controlled trial. It's recommended by HHS, CDC, or if it's a medication, the FDA, and it's got the research behind it, we're in. And if not, we're not. We'll wait for it. And that was the vision. So I decided to leave the day-to-day operation of my business, spent a year and a half developing a business plan to launch a national nonprofit with that vision in mind. I'm here tonight. looking at all of you, and so many of you I've worked with through the years, such good friends. Yes, I miss my son desperately. Every day. Every morning, every night, during the day. But I can honestly tell all of you that in many respects, I feel blessed. Truly. I've had the opportunity to work with side by side with so many wonderful people, including all of you. And it's working. Together, side by side, we are creating that, we are making that original vision a reality, helping people today, creating change forever, and all based on science. Just a few of our accomplishments, and I'm not going to go through all of them. We were the lead advocate working with the CDC back in 2016 to get national guidelines issued for the safer prescribing of dangerous opioids. Guidelines were published, prescriptions have come down in half. There's more to go. We then focused on treatment. We developed our nation's first national standard of care for the treatment of addiction, which is now endorsed by health insurers representing half of insured members in the United States. Half. We then built a quality measurement system that gathers data to show which treatment programs are following those science-based practices and which ones aren't. And then we publish it for free on our website for people looking for treatment to be able to find treatment that's based on science and determine if they need outpatient or residential or what services they need, all confidentially. But then we take an extra step. We license it to health insurers and to states, and they're using that data to build their networks. So if you're not a quality provider following science-based practices, you're out. And if you are and they're not in their network, they're going to go after you. That's changing the system forever, all based on science. One of the biggest accomplishments we had was provider education. Less than 10% of the doctors in this country, when we looked at it 5 years ago, had any education in the treatment of addiction. Less than 10%. Can you say that for any other major disease in this country? No. We partnered with the American Society of Addiction Medicine, two lead advocates, drafting legislation, getting it through the House, getting it through the Senate against all those who were against it. President Biden signed it into law 13 months ago, requiring every doctor in this country who has a license to prescribe controlled substances, which is essentially 95% of doctors, to have 8 hours of education in the treatment of addiction. Now that that's signed into law, it's going to go right to medical schools, because who wants to graduate medical school and then have to take the 8 hours? That's game-changing, talking about systems change. And it's not us. It's in you empowering all of us. We're doing this together. We couldn't do this policy work without funding, and you're funding that. You and so many others. Stigma. We've heard it throughout tonight. We developed our nation's first comprehensive measurement of addiction stigma with lead researchers at Indiana University. Published it in the fall of 2021. And it basically highlighted how much stigma is in this country in different segments and developed a plan to end it. We first started going after the way the public thinks about those with this. Developed a program based on philanthropic dollars, and then the state of Pennsylvania paid for it for a year to see if it would work. It worked so well, they funded it for 3 more years. We then went to Kentucky, California, Georgia, all funded by the states. We just picked up Michigan a month ago. We're talking to 5 other states. It's spreading, and I can honestly tell you, without any exaggeration, the results we're seeing has been the best stigma reduction ever documented on the planet Earth for the disease of addiction. And it's spreading. Just got $5.5 million from Elevance, formerly Anthem. And now add to that, and let's change the way that doctors think. We're developing an education program, and it'll be done in about 3 weeks, and then we're going to educate 3,000 doctors and look at the before and after, see if it worked. Half of doctors don't think this is a disease. We're going to change that. On and on. Let's talk about the hotel. So many of you have been there at the beginning. Dozens of companies joined in and partnered with us on our events. Some of you here even rappelled off this building, partnering our events. It's not about repelling. It's not about our walks. Is anyone here who's been to one of these events, especially the walks now? It's about people feeling accepted. I met someone a few years ago at our golf event in Connecticut. He came up to me and he said, 2018, where I think Jeff was the speaker, and said, I couldn't stop using drugs. One of my friends convinced me to come to that walk. It's the first time in my adult life I felt accepted, not disrespected. 2 days later, I stopped using substances, and in 2 weeks from today, Gary, it will be 3 years. That's what these events are about. With that, I am truly honored to ask Julianne Smith to join me at the podium, because it's about one-on-one stories. And Julianne, thrilled to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Congratulations, Mark. You know, the conference started with Mark winning an award, and it's ending with him winning another one because he does care for people to be their best, and that is so authentic, and it comes through. So this is a little weird. I usually stand on a stage at Alice to talk about brands or development or some subject matter that has to do with the hotel business. But today I'm standing in front of you as a sober person. God willing, in March, I'll be 8 years sober. Thank you. So, you know, my story does not include rehab or DUIs or any of those things. I was probably headed in that direction. I grew up in a family that was European. We had alcohol everywhere. You know, my mom put whiskey on my gums when I was a baby, so, you know, that's where it probably started. But, you know, I was stealing liquor from the liquor cabinet in high school and really was kind of a normal teenager, but I found friends who drank like me. And the way I drank was when I started, I didn't stop. And I didn't drink every day, but I found avenues to feel normal. I bartended. I found people who would drink worse than me, so I felt better about the way that I drank, but I have the disease of alcoholism, and I don't have the off button. When I start, I don't stop. So things changed for me. I became a mom, so I had periods of dry. Thank God I didn't drink while I was pregnant. And when I was pregnant with my second, my husband, who, you know, we drank together, that was part of our fun, got sober. So that was 13 years ago in January. So what shifted for me was I had periods of being dry. I didn't drink for 6 months at a time, 9 months at a time, and slowly the sort of obsession came back, the inability to kind of live life on life's terms and deal with all the stresses in my life, you know, wasn't there. So I traveled a lot for work, and we're a very hospitable industry, and we like to wine and dine. So, you know, I'd drink on work trips, I'd be dry at home, and I sort of had this like double life, and that worked sort of for about 5 years, but it was pretty progressive for me. And at an industry conference one day, I closed the bar again with some colleagues, having too much fun, and the next morning I woke up and I asked God to relieve me from my suffering and to allow me to be sober. I really wanted to be sober. So that afternoon I went to a recovery meeting, and for the following 6 months I went to a meeting almost every day. I really immersed myself in the 12-step program, which I couldn't speak more highly about. It is the program for living. It's the program for my life. And I found a community of people who were super supportive. What I didn't do was share with any of the people I worked with that I was sober. So people would say, you know, why aren't you drinking? You know, you have a glass of wine. Are you pregnant again? No, I'm not. I would say, well, I'm into yoga now. It's disrupting my sleep. I would make all these excuses because I was ashamed. And there is a lot of shame around this disease, and I didn't feel strong enough at that time to share that. I didn't know any sober people in this industry, but that I do now. There's more of us here than you might know. And I come to find out that people actually don't all drink like I did, so I was definitely the outlier there. And the first 6 to 9 months of my sobriety were really hard, and I remember going to my first client dinner and thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to entertain people and not participate in drinking? And I called my sponsor and I said, should I pretend like I'm drinking? She's like, no, don't pretend like you're drinking because you're going to start drinking. So I didn't do that, but I prayed about it, and I got to the dinner and nobody was ordering anything. Well, come to find out, I had dinner with a Mormon family. And I was like, okay, that God is with me. And that is kind of how that went. The next 6 months, every time I was at client dinner, I was with people who didn't drink. And I didn't know there were people who didn't drink. So anyway, fast forward to today, I'll celebrate 8 years because I love the life that I have now. My husband's also sober, I mentioned that, and he's all in. I'm actually leaving early tomorrow morning because he's going to be flying down to Florida to talk at a recovery conference. He's helped hundreds of men get sober. He takes the message of sobriety into state penitentiaries, and it's a part of our life now. On vacation in Bermuda, we both spoke as a couple at a recovery house there, and it's just been a big part of our lives, and we have this language that we didn't have, neither of us had growing up. We good parents, but not a lot of talk about emotions and how to deal with them, and we over-index on that at home to the point where my daughter's like, I know, Mom, keep my side of the street clean, mind my own business, make amends, say I'm sorry, all that stuff. All the things that I learned in the 12-step program, and today, my life is big. I am part of a lot of things in this industry, outside of this industry, in my church, in my community, and I can show up because I was able to get sober. And I've been more vocal about it in the last couple of years. It's not something I necessarily lead with, but I've been able to help a number of people, even in this industry, with their own issues or sharing that their family member or whatever have issues. And there's a lot of resources I can point people to. Shatterproof is an amazing organization because the recovery or the rehab centers is really fraught with a lot of corruption and people who aren't really there to help people. They're there to make money. And the fact that there's an organization that's really weeding through that complicated structure and introducing people to organizations that can help is huge. We don't really talk about it, right? It's not something that is top of mind or part of the conversation. And it's, life is hard. We all have issues. We have things in our lives. We talk about a lot of them. Recovery is not really one we do. So I hope to help normalize that with my support of Shatterproof. I encourage you to get involved. And Gary, thank you for asking me to do this. This is super awkward, but I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. Thank you.
At the end of the program, in closing, we've talked a lot about, in this program, of the work we've done and how you've all helped support that work. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about how our work can help you and your companies. First, I'd like to talk about what some of the other companies have done. I mentioned earlier that many companies have come to our events with their employees. That's helped people. Like that gentleman I mentioned, he felt accepted. Like you just heard from Julianne, telling her story and not being ashamed of it makes her feel better. And I would guarantee there's people in this audience who feel better now. So coming to our event, just so everyone knows, I'm going to show a short video in a minute. It's helping your employees. If you're a hotel company and you have hotels, form teams at hotels. HEI forms, we have hotels around the country. We form teams, 7, 8, 10 people from a hotel form a team. They can be a sponsor or not be a sponsor. The team can raise money or not raise money. If 10 employees of one of your hotels go to a walk in our city and they're not a sponsor and they don't raise any money, That's still great, because those people who went are there for a reason and they feel accepted. It's wonderful. If they want to raise money through social media, great, but they don't have to. If the hotel wants to be a sponsor, great, but they don't have to. And it's not a problem if they don't. When you see this walk, you'll know what I mean. What have some other companies done? There's 3 companies in our industry that have adopted our education program for their employees. It's 9 lessons of 5 minutes each, all digital. And it helps their employees. There's a lesson on opioids, there's a lesson on prevention, there's a lesson on stigma. They're 5 minutes each. 3 companies in our industry have it for their employees. Every one of you should have it for your employees. Hilton has taken it a step further. Hilton last year did that, and they worked with us for a year as the next step, not only giving our education program to their employees, but we had a conversation, Chris and I, for about 50 minutes that was accessible live to all their employees. Several thousand employees were either there in person or remotely, and then many thousands watched it later on video. And Chris and I normalized the disease with Chris's leadership, Chris Nasetta's leadership. The outpouring from Hilton employees after that was heartwarming. So many employees praised Chris and his senior team for normalizing it. What you've heard from Jeff, what you've heard from Mark, what you've heard from Julianne. It was amazing. And then employees, Hilton started to notice a little bit of change in the culture. They noticed that some teams, instead of going out for happy hour, were going on hikes together. And then employees started giving suggestions. One suggestion is, can we get another educational module for supervisors who have employees who could be struggling with this disease? So how do they handle it the right way? So we created a supervisor training. Those are things we can offer all of you. And anybody interested, Kirsten Seckler, where are you? Kirsten's leading all this work to partner with companies. So let me just show you beyond that a quick little video to show you, bring to life what I'm talking about.
We all know someone who's struggled, someone we've lost, someone who is in recovery. It is so critical that we start to talk about substance use disorder, addiction. Let's make it safe to talk about it in the conference room at work, around the kitchen table at home, and in our communities. Let's just break that silence, okay?
For those of you who've lost a loved one, we are here to remember them and honor them. For those of you in recovery, or maybe struggling to get into recovery, we admire your courage. We are here to drag addiction out of the shadows and into our hearts.
I'm also a recovering alcoholic and addict, so I'm proud to be here with those in recovery. Addiction and alcoholism is often like cancer. Everybody knows a household that's battling addiction. And I see how recovery changed people's lives. It started with my own, and together we really are stronger than addiction.
We've all been impacted by addiction, whether that's struggling ourselves or we've lost a loved one. It touches my heart to see everyone come together.
The Shatterproof mission means to me the ability to bring people together, raise awareness, raise money to try to help fight the stigma and prevent addiction from taking more lives in this world.
This is one of those diseases that hides in plain sight. It's one of these things where the stigma still is very, very significant.
The issue that Shatterproof is tackling is an issue throughout our country, throughout the world, that is just an issue that until now has not been tackled. And Shatterproof is just doing extraordinary work.
For someone who has struggled with addiction pretty much my whole entire life and just celebrated 11 years of sobriety, I know how important the work that they're doing is.
So many have learned firsthand that addiction has become one of the greatest public health crises that has ever faced our country. And with all of those who are afflicted, with all of those who are battling, only 10% of the people who are getting the treatment they need. It is not simply about just walking a walk or raising a dollar. It's about making change. It's about not tolerating a repetition of the past and working together to make sure that happens.
It's amazing here to have Wyndham Hotel Group supporting Gary and the Shatterproof organization. Shatterproof means hope to so many people, and we're so excited to be here and to be supporting this incredible organization.
We are Shatterproof!
I'd like to close with sharing what I think about a lot. I often wonder, and I don't know this because we never spoke about it, my son Brian lived in Los Angeles before he died. Did he turn on the 10 o'clock news one night and see, wow, they're doing a big walk for cancer research? Maybe he didn't think about it. Then maybe he looked at his Facebook feed a week or two later, this before Instagram, and wow, they're doing a bike ride for autism. And did he think, consciously or subconsciously, they don't do this for me, for addiction. We're not worth it. That's what this is about. Julianne, you're worth it. Anybody in this room with this disease, you're worth it. Your nephew, Mark, he's worth it. That's what this is about. And being from the hospitality industry, and what Mark said about taking care of people, that's what this is about. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the honorees we've had, the amazing $2 million in donations, which we will use, I commit, as effectively as possible to change the systems as well as help people today. Thank you all so very, very much. Thank you.